Hey, Chase.
Here, have a slug o' cola.
Hey, Sam.
Well, I told you we were going to watch an episode of Deep Space Nine, and I wasn't lying.
He's here. He's on the station.
Who is?
Nilva.
But he's not supposed to arrive until tomorrow.
That Nilva, he's a tricky one, but he makes a good cola.
What do we do? No, I can't meet Nilva now. I'm still lumbering.
You look very nice.
I want you to escort the chairman to his quarters. Tell him I'll meet him for dinner tonight.
Yeah. Oh, what if he asks about Ishka?
Tell him that Ishka is sick, but that tomorrow he'll be meeting with my other female financial advisor, Lumba.
Yeah, that means it was a good one.
Profit and Lace.
Profit and Lace.
Here, have a slug o' cola.
This episode made me want to have a drink, but not a slug of cola.
You'd better start memorizing those notes.
First, we need to practice your walking.
And you're sitting.
And you'd better work on that voice.
Any other comments?
Has anyone ever told you that you have lovely eyes?
This is one of the worst things I've ever seen. This was a stupid and dumb episode. Quark learned nothing, and it was like an actual sitcom. Total character stasis.
Yeah. Last time we were talking about Worf in Parallels in TNG, and we were saying, well, the thing is, Worf, and this was your point, I think, Worf changes and the character grows, and I said, yeah, and he has a connection with Deanna Troi later, and we, the viewer, learned something. There's none of that in this episode.
Right.
I hope the experience taught you something.
It made me more compassionate, more empathetic, more nurturing. I feel like I'm trapped in my worst nightmare.
Quark basically reveals himself to be the slime ball that he was at the beginning of the show, at the end of the show. And Grand Negus Zek at the end, he calls it. He's like, don't worry, Quark. You're going to be back to yourself.
Yeah, Rex from Toy Story definitely called that one.
Don't worry. I'm sure it won't last. You'll be back to your old self in no time.
Were dinosaurs hot-blooded or were they cold-blooded? I'm overwrought with anxiety over this issue. I mean, what temperature was their blood?
I have to say, though, as soon as the episode started and I heard the Baby's Day Out music playing, I knew that we were in for a rough ride.
You start tallying in your head. It's like, okay, that's probably going to be a running joke. There it goes again. Yeah. So this time the running joke was...
The running joke of the show was that... What's his name? I don't even remember. I don't care about this episode.
Oh, the guy... They called him Liquidator Brunt in the other episodes. Here they call him Brunt, but they call him Grand Negus Brunt.
Well, acting Negus.
And that's what the other people will always chime in. It doesn't matter who it is. Acting Grand Negus.
Grand Negus front!
Acting Grand Negus Brunt.
As to qualify and explain.
And they do it over and over
and over and over. Thinking back to the grand classics of this, you've got Bosom Buddies with Tom Hanks, you've got Tootsie with Dustin Hoffman, and then you've got Mrs. Doubtfire with the great actor Robin Williams.
Hey, let's go back further and even say Twelfth Night. Shakespeare.
Twelfth Night, right. You've got this notion of what does it mean?
It's an archetypal story.
Right, a character who's playing a character who's playing a character, almost a play within a play. And we were talking about this earlier. One of the great strengths about DS9 is you take any scene of DS9 and compare it to Enterprise. I like Enterprise, don't get me wrong. But you take DS9 and you have an ensemble piece. Even in this episode, you've got Quark, the Grand Negus, Lita, Rom, Nog, the servant for the Negus, all in the same scene. You've got them all blocked. And you've got that movement of the characters. There's a dimension for all the characters. They work well as an ensemble. They're funny. Even the fact that most of them are minor characters. It's fun.
I will say that you make a good point that I actually think the blocking of the episode was pretty good. It's just that the blocking came to the service of nothing.
A play is more than the blocking, right? Characters in Enterprise, they don't even have the blocking. They don't have the ensemble approach. It's usually 2 or 3 people, and you have such wide open shots in the space station on DS9, which is funny because you'd think a space station would be kind of a closed-in space. But on Enterprise, the show is really zoomed in, it's tight corridors, and I get that they're all working in a big Apple product here, this ship in space that was designed for finesse and for suppleness, but not really for space issues. You know, like a Mac in space.
Well, I have to say one thing is that with so many movies today, we have like basically CGI has replaced the need for sets in a lot of movies. And that's one of the positive things about the set design on Deep Space Nine. We even see this in the episode where characters have to kind of navigate around a corridor, right? Because it's too tightly spaced.
Right. In the doorways, you actually have to walk over the doorways. When the actors complained about that all the time on the show, apparently. But that did add a certain dimension to the show where the station itself, because of its distantness from aesthetic design and universal design, really becomes a very difficult space to navigate.
You and I watched The Magnificent Ferengi.
Right, and I think that was because they had one of these or two of these Ferengi episodes every year of the show, and some of them are better than others, and this was the one right before that.
I want to say that this episode was worse by far than The Magnificent Ferengi to me. Now, that might be because I have a Western bias to me. The Magnificent Ferengi, I thought that the setup had an interesting setup. It was kind of convoluted and funny, but then again, this was also convoluted, sort of.
Just not funny.
The chairman of Sluggo Cola.
He's a very powerful and influential voice within the FCA.
Unfortunately, he's an influential voice for the status quo.
I don't think Sluggo Cola has changed its advertising slogan in 300 years. Drink Sluggo Cola, the slimiest cola in the galaxy.
The Magnificent Ferengi had a lot of funny moments where they were actually genuinely funny. Prophet and Lace, I think one of the only times I actually laughed out loud and thought it was genuinely funny was when it cut to Quark saying, "So I called her the worst thing ever," right?
I'm not sure exactly. She keeps repeating the same phrase over and over. It's all Quark's fault. It's all Quark's fault.
I wonder what she means by that.
And I accused her of being the worst thing that ever happened to the Ferengi Alliance, and she clutched her chest and collapsed.
So that was kind of a funny, like, how it cut from one scene to Quark making fun of his mom and, actually explaining the situation that happened with her. But overall, it's just like, I look at this, and then I think about all of the great moments in Star Trek history, right? So I think about, like, The Next Generation, that episode where Picard, is looking at the lights, and he's like, there are 4 lights, and he says,
There are 4 lights!
How can you even compare this? This is like trash literature compared to art.
Well, there have been many questions of identity raised in Trek before. You've got questions of identity having to do with alien races, with what it means to be a human being in space, what it means for Odo on this show to be a member of a race who he's really an outsider in an outsider position. And then you've got Garrick, who's this character who has been sent away from his homeland and he's in exile. And then you've got Quark, and he has the opportunity to engage with all these different character types. Everybody knows that the Ferengi role on the show has been relegated to being the clowns of the universe. And Rom says to Quark, it's like, we can't get a hold of everybody on Ferenginar, our home planet. We have to find out what's going on. So they go to Ops, where all the officers on the station are. And this is where you get the prerequisite shot where everyone in their contract gets to be in every episode, if they're a main actor, at least one scene per show. So you've got all the other actors together, basically. One of the things Rom says is, can you think of all the devastation and all the bad things that would happen if Ferenginar fell to the enemy, to the Dominion? And then Worf says something like, I cannot think of one.
Invasion of Ferenginar?
Think of the terrible repercussions to the Alpha Quadrant.
I cannot think of any.
Now that's a ha-ha moment for me. I thought, okay, that's great. To me, that was comparable to the episode of TNG where Worf and Q were together, and Q was trying to convince the Enterprise crew, saying, what do I have to do to prove to you now that I've been cursed and been made mortal? And Worf says, die.
I have no powers. What must I do to convince you people?
Die.
Oh, very clever, Worf. Eat any good books lately?
So there were some things about the episode that were funny. It just doesn't fly. It just doesn't work.
Well, I want to say that, for me, one of the problems is that when you center an episode around a character that's primarily a comical character, it's to be expected that there is no character progression by the end of the episode, because it's just like a standard sitcom. You don't really expect the characters to change that much between, from season to season. Comedy tends to be kind of static in terms of character, because for comedy, it's often not the characters that are important. It's often the premise, right? That's why comedies can often get away with having one-dimensional characters. That's because comedies are often making fun of ideas and using characters as a platform for that. And for me, centering an episode around Quark, which Quark is obviously meant to be, making fun of capitalism, basically. The whole Ferengi are basically capitalists, for those who aren't aware. And for me, creating an episode around him, when we realize that he's going to be a joke, why should we devote our time watching this character on screen when we realize that nothing is really going to come about his actions in the end? He doesn't learn anything from this episode, and that's a stark contrast with Worf.
Thinking back to the episode Parallels.
Right, yes. Because Worf does learn something in his episode. We know a lot about the Klingons as a species and whatnot, but Worf in some ways goes against that, and we aren't made to believe that Worf is some sort of comedic character.
I'm trying.
I'm trying.
Well, try harder.
I'm also thinking about, and we've talked about this before, about Jack Sparrow's character, about
From the Pirates of the Caribbean.
Right, specifically the fourth Pirates of the Caribbean movie, the Evil Mermaid episode. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen the Pirates movies. In the fourth movie, you've already gotten rid of all of the other characters, Orlando Bloom and the other characters who are fun and ensemble, and now all you've got left basically is Jack Sparrow. And he's comedic, but when he's the centerpiece, the movie doesn't fly very well because he can't really sustain a comedic role and what would be the central character role also.
It's kind of like the Urkel effect when you think about it. Mm-hmm. Taking sort of this minor character who everyone seems to like and then kind of amplifying it so that they become kind of the focus of the whole show. And the problem is that sometimes the show can't really work off of that as a pivot, right?
Right, what happened to Family Matters?
Oh yeah, Family Matters. But it's kind of like, for me, Quark is kind of like turning Urkel into the main character of Star Trek because Quark as an Urkel character, he's meant to be the butt of jokes, he's meant to garner a laugh from the audience, but in the end, is he really meant to be the centerpiece of an episode and its arc? Because we ultimately know that we're not supposed to take this seriously, and there's no really lasting effects. We watched The Magnificent Ferengi, and we also watched this episode, and in terms of universal effects, this seems very much isolated to Ferengi society, and that doesn't seem to really mesh well with the other stories.
Right, and that kind of Worf's point, which is comedic, he can't think of any reason why there would be a problem with the whole Dominion War arc if something happened to the Ferengi, and the truth is there wouldn't be really any. And now, quite frankly, with the characters themselves are kind of woven into the story later to where Quark and Nog have a very pivotal role individually to play. But the whole Ferengi Empire means nothing in the grand scheme of things in Star Trek. You might as well not have it. It's just a commentary upon capitalism.
You drink Sluggo Cola, don't you?
The slimiest coal in the galaxy? Doesn't everybody?
Good boy.
So there was this early episode that was a Ferengi episode of DS9, and it was basically a spoof of Casablanca. Mm-hmm. So the point of that episode was Quark met this female individual who was Cardassian, and apparently he and she had a brief romance years before.
He kept up with her.
And he kept up with her. He missed her. He had a flame for her, but she basically told him to leave her alone. And now she comes back, and she's one of the leaders of a resistance movement on Cardassia. And she needs to be smuggled off the station, but the Cardassian government is onto her and really wants to take her down. But her students make a deal with Quark that if she will stay with them, then the students will get smuggled off the station. Quark's character evolves a little bit. You see him more as a romantic lead, and of course all it is just imitating Casablanca at every move.
Can't even think it.
Okay, I'll say it for you. We fell in love, and that month we spent together was the best time of our lives, and you know it.
I think you're confusing lust with love.
I admit I'm capable of that, but not this time. I loved you, Nadim.
Then how could you have betrayed me?
I didn't betray you.
Don't lie to me, Quark. I know better. You used my personal access codes to authorize payments for goods you never provided.
So I took a little money from the Cardassian communication service. They could afford it.
You stole that money.
I saw a chance for profit, and I took it. Maybe that was wrong, I don't know. But what I really regret is betraying your trust. That was the worst mistake of my life.
And you do it again in a second.
It's almost plot by plot, scene by scene, stealing from that film. That being said, it almost makes Quark believable for a moment, more than just a comedic standby, more than just a comic effect. There are other episodes with Quark also, too, in which, like you said, dramatic situations tend to have a character effect that carries through. Shows like this, episodes like this, that really don't carry forth anything for the character, that you have to ask, what's the point for the viewer or the character?
It seems to me that episodes like this undermine the episodes like you're talking about. And for me, that's obviously probably a conscious decision by the people writing them and whatnot. But it seems like such a wasted effort because it's okay to have a character that's, pretty focused on comedy and, the entire Ferengi society is pretty comedic in general. But at the same time, does every part of that society have to be satirized to such an extreme degree? Why can't they have a serious episode that has long-lasting effects for Quark's character? Because like you're saying, that Casablanca episode that occurred between him and the Cardassian woman, that clearly doesn't have much of an impact on later episodes, does it? Because it's completely undermined by these things.
Well, that's true, because that character never appears again. And you have to think, it's like, well, that's unfortunate, because there were a lot of dissident movement episodes having to do with the Cardassians later in the show. It's like, why couldn't she come back again? And it's almost like shows like Star Trek lose a sense of their continuity there. And there was this issue also with the arc of the Maquis. Sisko had a friend who was in the Maquis, and there was an episode about that. I think his name was Cal, and Cal went off and he betrayed Sisko and joined the Maquis, and then you never hear about Cal again until another character, Michael Eddington, takes over the Maquis role. And then later on, Michael Eddington reveals to Sisko that his friend Cal died. And that's always the standby with episodes. It's like, well, we couldn't get the actor back, and they were doing other things, and they wanted more money, and so we just decided to change the situation. And so that being said, there are little moments like that in Trek, especially in DS9, that they really could have, pardon the expression, capitalized upon, but they didn't, especially with character moments. That said, DS9 is hands down one of the best enterprises, pardon the pun, for Star Trek in terms of character and character development. But this is still an area in which they dropped the ball, and I'm really hoping that the new show will pick up in terms of continuity of character.
Well, for me, ultimately, I believe that comedy characters work best when they are most subtle, right? Mm-hmm. I don't like it when a comedy character gets so popular that they decide to turn them into a spotlight for the show, because I think you risk the idea of oversaturation of the character.
So we both have talked about the low points. Were there any scenes that really stood out as being memorable or funny or humorous or worthwhile for this episode?
Emotions are raging out of control.
Is there anything I can do?
Would you mind giving me a hug?
Hug?
Just a small one. Thank you!
No. Okay, some of the moments were... I think I mentioned earlier about some of the cutting between scenes I liked in terms of like style. I actually thought that added to the comedy element. They cut to Quark at the bar, and he says, "So I called her the worst thing ever." Okay, that was actually kind of funny. Mm-hmm. I think that Quark's brother is generally kind of a funny guy in the episode. I think you described him best as an idiot genius. Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty accurate. I don't know. What are some of the things you liked about the episode?
I honestly laugh every time I see Grand Negasek show up on the screen.
If you insist.
Yeah, and his character is just so one-dimensional, but in a good way. I just can't not like the Zek character.
Well, he's the quintessential comedy character in the show, and I think he really works because he's not at the forefront. He's not... He's a funny character, but he's not the butt of all jokes character like Quark is, and trying to turn him... It would be like having an episode where the Grand Nagus is the main character, and the entire episode's arc revolves around him. In this episode, that's not really true. He's kind of a minor character that's supporting Quark's character.
And Grand Nagus Zek is really one of those characters that really works as a peripheral character for that reason. That one-dimensional quality, that sense that he's always in the background, lurking or scheming... Well, that works for his type of character. He's not a villain, he's not a hero, he's just there. He's just there working things, people are working him, but he's present and he's funny. And that's probably one of the best things about this episode. The other thing is that we really don't get to see, because the episode is flipped for the Ferengi, we really don't get to see what's going on elsewhere in the station, and we were talking about this while watching. It's like, well, maybe we'll have that scene of Worf sitting down eating a sandwich. Of course, it would probably be a Targ sandwich or something like that.
Or maybe Sisko's just reading a book.
Yeah, and there was an episode in which, the Magnificent Ferengi, in which they're crawling through the ducts, and the excuse to bring in Sisko was that they accidentally crawled and opened a duct into Sisko's office and said, "Oh, sorry, wrong way," and they close it and they leave. And everything goes on like normal.
I don't even believe he shows up for the rest of the episode after that.
No, I don't think he does. And Dr. Bashir shows up again just because, well, we're not going to get into that, but Bashir has a pivotal role. This notion of identity in Star Trek and how it's explored, again, this is really one of those episodes where we don't really learn anything. We don't really pick up anything about the characters, about the situation, about the motivation for the characters, about their desires, about their interests, about anything.
The worst thing is that at the end of the episode, they kind of play at the idea of Quark's character changing. So it seems like at the end, it's hinting at possibly Quark learned a lesson. Maybe he should respect his, female worker more.
Yeah, and Quark really doesn't learn anything. He really doesn't grow. There's one character moment in an episode, by the way, and this is a great Ferengi episode, the one dealing with the union, in which Rom, his brother, starts a union for the bar workers. And that's actually a really good Rom episode and a really good dramatic... But again, it's a dramatic episode, right? But we see nothing like that here, and there's that whole reversion, and we know that the writers are playing with this, and we know that we're hoping for some glimmer that the episode is going to be worthwhile, but it's not. It's just a pure, 100%, unabashed waste of time. And maybe that's the reason why I like the episode so much, is because I don't like it. It's totally irredeemable, totally pointless, but at the same time, I kind of like the fact that a TV show can waste the time of its fans and still expect them to come back the next week.
I think what you just said is pretty much the epitome of fandom.
At least I'm not like you. A selfish, spineless, ungrateful.
Don't forget miserable.
Let's say that the next show, the next Trek on
CBS,
13 episodes. Do you think that with the economy they're working in now for streaming services, that they could get away with making a throwaway episode or two of Trek for a new streaming service like that? Or do you think they're going to be very much by the book and say, no, this has to be brutal with what makes the cut, and this type of thing just wouldn't fly? What do you think?
Well, I think that when you look at the trends of television shows these days, a lot of people talk about the fact that they prefer TV to movies these days, and that's because television shows nowadays tend to have very streamlined story arcs that span the breadth of an entire season.
Mm-hmm.
A good example of this is the first season of Daredevil, where every episode feels like it adds something new to the continuity of the plot. It feels like a total arc, a crescendo towards a climactic moment, and then, it has that denouement at the end. And I feel like a lot of TV shows today tend to emulate that model, not just in terms of Marvel shows like Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, and whatnot, but even when you think of other shows like The Wire and whatnot, a lot of TV shows nowadays are tending to go towards that single season arc that kind of has that climactic moment and the drop off at the end. Mm-hmm. And I have a feeling that Trek is going to emulate that in a lot of ways, because CBS really wants Trek to be, a popular flagship for their network. They really want to make this a selling point. And I have a feeling that they're probably going to be emulating the Netflix model in some ways.
So it might be more like the third season of Enterprise, or like the Dominion War arc in DS9, where it follows a solid arc for a season or half a season and really doesn't get the opportunity to have these one-shot adventures where it's just a misfire for the whole episode.
That's what I could see happening, yeah.
Well, I guess time will tell, but I'm looking forward to seeing if that pays out, and hopefully we won't see anything like this.
Well, Sam, thanks for making me watch this.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, next on the docket is going to be A Night in Sick Bay, one of the best, worst episodes of Enterprise.
Oh, come on!
I thought you said something about denobulin lemur being highly sought after.
Oh, very much so. Their kidneys are considered a great delicacy.
Join us next time as I continue to torture Chase with these great, great episodes of Trek. And once again, this has been Star Trek Supplemental. Thank you, Chase.
Here, have a slug o' cola.
Yeah.